The pager's insistent beep shattered the silence of the night, pulling me from a half-dreaming fog into the sharp reality of the streets. Rain streaked the windshield as I hit the lights and siren, each droplet catching the flashing reds and blues like fractured glass. The city was quiet, deceptively calm, but I knew better. Every call could be the one that changed everything. Tonight felt different the moment the address appeared, a suburban home on a narrow, dimly lit street. By the time we arrived, the storm had grown louder, the wind whipping through the trees, rattling the house like a warning. The front door was slightly ajar. Inside, silence. Too much silence. My boots splashed through puddles on the floor as I stepped closer, the smell of antiseptic mixed with something faintly metallic. Then I saw him. Mark, a man in his 40s, lay motionless on the kitchen floor, his eyes half closed, skin pale in a way that seemed almost unreal. His chest rose and fell erratically, irregular like a song missing beats. I could feel my own heart matching the staccato rhythm, adrenaline flooding every nerve. I crouched beside him, scanning for the obvious signs, the textbook indicators, but nothing fit. There was no trauma, no apparent cause for this collapse. His limbs twitched, but not in the way I had been trained to recognize. His pulse was weak, yet fluctuating, jumping unpredictably, like a heart refusing to obey logic. I called for the monitor and watched numbers dance in chaotic patterns. Confusion hit first, then a creeping dread. Something was happening here that I could not place. The room felt impossibly small as I worked, my hands moving on instinct, following years of training, yet every action felt inadequate. Mark's wife hovered near the doorway, clutching the counter for support, eyes wide with fear I could almost feel radiating from her. The weight of her worry pressed against me like another body. I reassured her, but I could see the questions in her eyes. What is happening? Is he going to survive? I didn't have answers. Not yet. And then it happened. His vitals spiked in ways that made no sense. Blood pressure dropped, oxygen levels fluctuated, and yet his consciousness seemed present. His eyes, fluttering open, locked on mine for a fleeting moment, and I felt it. A recognition, a message in a gaze I could not interpret. My breath caught. In all my years on the job, I had never seen this. Not like this. Not someone who seemed simultaneously here and somewhere else entirely. Every muscle in my body tensed. Training kicked in, but the fear remained, gnawing at the edges of my professionalism. The clock on the wall ticked audibly in my ears. Each second was a lifetime. And yet, as I prepped him for transport, as we secured him onto the stretcher and loaded him into the ambulance, I couldn't shake the sense that this was more than a medical emergency. This was a case that would haunt me. The kind of case that leaves a mark, not just on your memory, but on the way you understand life, death, and what lies in the space between. As the ambulance doors closed and the siren pierced the night again, I looked back at the kitchen, at the quiet, storm-battered house, and I knew this was unlike anything I had ever faced. Something was wrong, profoundly wrong. And yet, in that moment, all I could do was drive, keep him alive, and prepare for a mystery that refused to make sense. And then, everything changed. Mark wasn't a man defined by illness. To his friends and family, he was the kind of person who laughed easily, who could light up a room without trying. Yet beneath that ordinary exterior, something subtle and terrifying had been creeping for months, unnoticed or perhaps dismissed as stress, fatigue, or the ordinary aches of middle age. His wife, Karen, described it as a creeping unease, small episodes of dizziness, fleeting blackouts, occasional confusion. As hours passed, Mark's condition continued to defy logic. Doctors consulted charts, specialists whispered hypotheses, but nothing fully accounted for the symptoms. His body was a riddle, and we were all fumbling for clues. Even with all our training, all our experience, we were confronted with the impossible. And in that impossibility, a haunting truth began to settle over the room. Some medical cases are not simply rare. They are fundamentally beyond our current knowledge, a collision of human fragility and mystery that leaves even the most seasoned professionals unsettled. And yet, amid the chaos, a quiet resilience lingered in Mark. Between convulsions, between hallucinations, there were moments of lucidity, brief windows into a mind trapped yet aware. Those moments were fleeting, but they were profound. They reminded me that even in the most incomprehensible situations, humanity persists, stubborn and fragile, defying the cold logic of medicine. And in those moments, I realized that this case was no ordinary emergency. It was a haunting journey into the unknown, one that would leave its mark on everyone involved. Even after the adrenaline faded and the chaos of the emergency room settled into a tense rhythm, I couldn't shake the images of Mark from my mind. Nights became restless, each shadow in my apartment a flicker of the kitchen floor, each distant sound a heartbeat out of sync. I kept replaying the moments over and over. The erratic monitors, the twitching limbs, the look in his eyes when he seemed aware yet unreachable. The professional calm I wore during the call felt like a thin mask. Underneath, a storm of questions, doubts, and fears raged uncontrollably. I found myself questioning every decision. Could I have intubated sooner? Administered a different medication? Positioned him differently on the gurney? Each choice, each hesitation haunted me. The weight of responsibility pressed down harder, because this wasn't a routine case. This wasn't a broken bone, a cut, a fever. This was something that challenged the very foundation of what I believed I knew about life, about the human body, about consciousness itself. And I was at the center of it. Memories of Mark's gaze returned in the quiet hours of the night. That fleeting connection, eyes meeting mine across the storm of convulsions and alarms, was more than recognition. It felt like an unspoken communication, a silent plea that I couldn't fully decipher. I thought about his wife, waiting, terrified, searching for answers in my face. I thought about the moments I had tried to reassure her, speaking words that now felt hollow in the echo of my own uncertainty. I was trained to act, to save, to understand. But here, I was powerless, a witness to a mystery beyond skill, beyond training. The experience left marks I didn't anticipate. Ordinary stress turned into a quiet, gnawing tension. Every siren on the street made me flinch. Every call to a patient's home became a rehearsal for the unknown. I replayed procedures in my mind, trying to pinpoint mistakes, but there were none, not in the conventional sense. The haunting truth was that some moments in medicine are unsolvable. Some lives present riddles that refuse clarity, leaving those who care for them with questions that cannot be answered. Yet, amidst the doubt and fear, there was also a strange clarity. I realized that part of being an EMT is learning to hold space for the inexplicable, to act even when understanding. Each case we respond to leaves traces, but Mark's lingered differently. It occupied a space between fear and awe, medical reality and the inexplicable. My colleagues asked for my impressions, for objective observations, and I could offer them data, numbers, actions taken. But the rest, the unease, the surreal experiences, the brief moments when consciousness seemed untethered from the body, remained my own. I questioned how to reconcile professional detachment with the deeply human experience of witnessing something that defied reason. The medical community continued to grapple with the case. Specialists consulted journals, reviewed similar anomalies, and debated whether this was a known condition manifesting in an extreme form or a phenomenon entirely new. But the reality was that medicine has its boundaries, and some mysteries refuse to conform to our understanding. Even with decades of training and experience, there are moments where the answers are simply beyond reach, leaving both professionals and families with the weight of uncertainty. In the quiet aftermath, I walked the hospital halls alone, the soft hum of fluorescent lights echoing my thoughts. Every piece of equipment, every empty room reminded me of the fragility of life and the limits of our knowledge. Some questions could not be answered. How much did Mark truly experience during those moments of altered consciousness? Was it a byproduct of physiological chaos, or did he glimpse something beyond the tangible world? I carried those questions with me, knowing that their weight would not fade, and that the story would continue to live in memory and reflection long after the immediate crisis had passed. Mark eventually recovered enough to leave the hospital, but the story did not end with his discharge. The lingering uncertainty, the haunting glimpses into consciousness, and the fragile line between science and the unknown remained. For his family, for the medical staff, and for me as the EMT who had been there at the edge of understanding, the experience left a permanent mark. A reminder that some cases do not conclude with clarity, but with questions that echo in quiet, empty spaces long after the alarms have ceased. In the days and months that followed, I found myself revisiting Mark's case over and over, not as a story to tell, but as a memory that refused to fade. The details, the chaos of the emergency, the erratic rhythms of his heart, the fleeting moments when his consciousness seemed untethered from his body, continued to echo in my mind. It was a story that had begun in fear and confusion, but had transformed into something far more profound. A meditation on mortality, on the fragile boundary between life and death, and on the limits of what medicine can explain. I thought about the countless lives I had encountered in my career, the emergencies I had responded to with calm precision, the cases that ended predictably. And then there was Mark, a man who had challenged everything I thought I knew, forcing me to confront the unsettling truth that not all medical mysteries have answers, and not all consciousness can be confined to the body we inhabit. The experience changed the way I approach every call, every patient. I am more attentive to the subtle, the inexplicable, and the human moments that often slip beneath the surface of clinical data. Karen reached out in the weeks following his discharge, sharing her own reflections and fears. She spoke of the quiet after the storm, of nights spent watching Mark sleep, of the lingering questions that hovered over their family like an uninvited guest. In her words, I recognized the universality of uncertainty, the way it threads through every life, touching families, medical staff, and patients alike. There are moments when we confront the incomprehensible, and we must carry those moments forward, not with answers, but with empathy, awareness, and respect for the fragile nature of life. Even now, I replay certain moments, the subtle flicker in Mark's eyes, the soft voice that spoke of visions, the uncanny calm amidst physiological chaos. Those memories are not just reminders of a medical anomaly. They are reminders of the human experience at its most profound and mysterious. They remind me that medicine, while powerful, is not omnipotent. There are thresholds beyond which our knowledge cannot reach, experiences that elude measurement, and consciousness that defies definition. And so, the story of Mark remains with me, haunting and humbling. It is a reminder that life is fragile, that knowledge